Welcome for anyone watching. My name is Jordan. I am a curator for JTR Presents. I have the pleasure and privilege of speaking with Karrington Gardner here, who is part of our exhibit known as Dual Diagnosis. So, for Dual Diagnosis, it is an exhibition, both virtual and physical, that showcases the work of four North Carolina artists, and who each of them have profound works touching on very important subjects. So, today we'll be talking with Carrington particularly about safe spaces. In this exhibit, it's primarily focused about access to mental health and mental health topics relating to men of color, particularly Black men. And one of the interesting things that we came across in our earlier conversations is this idea of building space.
Mhm.
And so, first and foremost, Carrington, thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much. It's really a pleasure.
Yeah, anytime. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, when at the start of this exhibition, when I started thinking about it, I was already thinking about what artists are doing cool stuff related to the topic of mental health. And so
Mhm.
I actually spoke with William Paul Thomas, because I think you're familiar with his cyanosis work.
Yeah.
And so, based on the premise of that, he brought up your name. And then also, another mutual friend of ours, Gabrielle, she brought you up when I shared the idea with her on a couple of other projects and a little bit about like mental. She's like, "Yeah, you should. Do you know Carrington?" I was like, "No." So when I found out that we were in the same show Amaya curated over at Green Hill, I was like, "Oh,
Yeah.
great!" So it was like a great time that we ran into each other. And so after our conversations, you talked about safe spaces, and I got a
Mhm.
little bit more, and it just made sense to have you as a part of this show. And so my first question is, how does your work touch on the subject of mental health? I think it's better that you describe it
Mhm.
than all of us kind of talk about it for you.
I feel that my work, when I was looking at it today, one thing that I definitely thought about was rest. Um, my mother is very big on like you need to rest, no matter how much society says like you have to keep going, keep going. You have to have moments of rest. And I feel like in my work, even though it's like chaotic and has a lot of perspective shifts and like color shifts and whatnot, I like these little moments of rest where like the viewer can kind of go, okay, I'm good. Now let me get back to it. And that's something I literally practice in my life. Like if I feel that I'm getting too wound up with tasks and art projects and so on and so forth, I will literally go outside and walk and just like clear my mind with silence or just listen to the breeze or whatever and just have those moments of rest. I also feel like contextually the work talks about spaces and like what a safe comfortable space could mean to somebody. And of course, speaking from a place of privilege, like not everybody has that, but what are those spaces that people can feel comfortable and safe in?
Yeah, I definitely see that. I mean, in particular, one of your pieces from the Barber series and another piece called Getting the Cut, I believe
Yeah.
is what it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like the people depicted in that, there is a sense of calm that I get when I look at that. And just like even the whole practice of getting the hair cut, like you literally
Mhm.
are just laying back, relaxing. It's almost a
Yeah.
meditative experience.
Yeah.
And then I find that interesting compared to like the other parts of your Barber series where there's no people, there's a sense of calmness even in that liminal space of a barber shop. So I
Mhm.
definitely see that. I read a little bit about about your thesis. I believe it was something you made at you that you wrote when you were at UNCG.
Yeah.
Okay. Um, what 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 I took away from that was just the importance of having a space where Black men in particular can be safe and feel safe to be
Mhm.
vulnerable, to open up. And traditionally that's been a barber shop, but it I started realizing I don't know of too many other spaces. And then I think in talking about your earlier works, it looks like you were
Mhm.
exploring like the power of space in general. So,
Yeah.
you know, I feel like it's a that particular topic is like a subtopic of a larger conversation.
Mhm.
It's specifically about like healing spaces, building space, and this sort of like claiming space. Can you expand on that? Well, really, what actually inspired you to do this work?
Honestly, I had a very existential moment in the studio one day. And I just realized like everything, well, majority, if not everything in our lives is a construct made to kind of aid in some type of narrative. Whether that's like our identity itself, racial hierarchies, or just honestly anything, everything is curated to have some type of meaning, association, so on and so forth. So I thought about what are spaces that I curate to help me feel safe, make me feel the happiest, so on and so forth. And then what are spaces I might feel a little bit more uncomfortable in, or I might have to take out this part of me to be seen more, or what part do I kind of have to bring out more to be heard? Just thinking about like the nuance of human existence and how much you kind of have to change and shift, and how I wanted to show that in the spaces I was constructing.
Yeah, and also having an existential crisis, I think, is part of going through grad school. That
Yeah.
was that was
Yeah.
definitely me at SCAD.
Yeah. It was definitely one
um,
of those days.
yeah. Well, also, I think you mentioned that before of like not feel. Well, can you expand on that a little bit more? Because I think you
Yeah.
mentioned earlier about recognizing there wasn't a lot of spaces where people like us were in.
Honestly, so going back to like where I kind of got the inspiration, I grew up in predominantly Black spaces. Like the school I went to was predominantly Black. Of course, you had like some exchange students or like different ethnicities and cultures like kind of mixed in throughout. But I never had to question like, oh, I'm Black, or like really question that part of my identity. But I've also noticed as I go up in my education, the less of me that are in the room. So when I got to grad school, not that anyone necessarily made me feel isolated, but like when you look around and go, oh, I'm one of two, or I'm just the only one, it's kind of a strange experience. Because for some reason with Black people, we feel like we have to like overexert our Blackness, or like really proclaim like I am Black, especially in like art spaces. Um, it just felt like a weird pressure, like I have to make everything super pro-Black. Not that that's a problem, but like I feel like my Blackness would have shown up in the work regardless of like the subject matter. So that's also kind of where that came from. And like I said, no one made me feel uncomfortable about it, but it just really made me think like, what happens when we're in this space, and like what's the psychological process or mental process that kind of happens to us when we're not in predominantly Black spaces. And like I've mentioned before, code switching, like it'd be days where I'm like, ooh, I maybe shouldn't have said that, or like maybe I shouldn't have said it like this. Or like, did they understand what I was saying because I didn't use some like really big academic word, or just like it was like a bunch of mental gymnastics that no one necessarily put on me, but it's just weird when you're the only one in a space, or like one of few in a space, or at least in that program, I'll say.
Yeah, and I think it also because you teach at A&T, so
Mhm.
I think you've brought up before too about like this going back to curating a space. What I'm hearing is like this there's a sense of ownership and a reclamation in curating the space and making these intentional spaces for yourself.
Yeah.
And I know you just well, it sounded like you started off from sort of an individualistic point of view, but I can also see it as being collective. I mean,
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
anecdotally speaking, I think Black people in general, we tend to lean more collective. And
Yeah.
so, can you kind of share more about your experience sort of curating the spaces at A&T for your students? What has that been like?
Honestly, it's been a great transition, to be honest, because I went here 2017 to 2021. So like I kind of understood the culture and like how, I don't want to say how things were ran, but like, understood like how the professors and the students kind of worked to create what was the A&T, or what is the A&T visual art program. So when I got here and now I'm teaching the next generation of artists, I had to think like, what are things that I got while I was here that I want to pass on? And then what are things that I can add to it that I might not have gotten, so I can make their experience even better. So I think about like the way the classroom's set up. This year I was really big on interaction between students, especially because, after COVID, everybody's so separated. I was really big on like, no, you have to talk to your classmates. You need to understand who the people are in this room. So when we get to like critique, or if it's times where maybe I can't help a student, but maybe your classmate can help, it's easier when you know the people around you. And I will say I did a really good job of that. I literally saw two of the students that didn't know each other at the beginning of the semester. All of a sudden, they're best friends, like going everywhere together. So it was just really important to like curate a great environment where the students felt safe enough to learn, and then safe enough to like trust me through the process.
No, that's beautiful. I think earlier you mentioned before about like acknowledging the teachers before you that created the
Yeah.
space when you're a student.
Hmm.
Um, that's actually what made me again think about this sort of collective ownership, and that's kind of where I was getting that. You
Hmm.
know, I think especially in terms of mental health, I spoke with Marion Tisdale, who I think you're also familiar with, and we had
Hmm.
talked about because I think a lot of your work resonates with his.
Hmm.
I think because we were talking about having a space where people can heal, or what does healing look like. And
Yeah.
so combining those two ideas, your work definitely identifies that, especially around the barbershop. But this kind of makes me think about what other spaces can we identify that is safe for Black men? Because like I find it's beautiful that Chapel Hill has a whole program called Barbershop, and it's like
Hmm.
this truck with barbers that are trained by mental health professionals to
Hmm.
then kind of act as like a surrogate therapist while cutting people's hair. And I thought that was absolutely brilliant. And also,
Yeah.
I think that's kind of proof in and of itself on how much of a cultural sort of safe space it is for a place of healing. But I would say, what do you think? Yeah, what would make more safe? What would making more safe spaces look like in that regard?
Like we were talking about earlier, they definitely have to be intentional. And like
Mm,
really think about, is it just for Black boys? Is it for Black boys and girls? Is it young or is it old? Like, is it a one-time thing where they then share the knowledge? Is it a reoccurring event where they then bring more people in? And I also think we were talking about like just places in general. Of course, you have churches, but then that depends on your relationship with religion and all that. Recreation centers, which just kind of came up in my mind because I know a lot of times when I was younger, I would go to recreation centers for like summer camps or like events, and that was a really big gathering place,
mhm.
especially in Columbia, South Carolina. It was just great to have like everyone together where it was like a MLK day, or if it was like a I don't know, like a basketball tournament somebody was throwing. Those were really good places to just like enjoy people's company and feel safe for like a little bit of time. And then depending on, where you go afterwards, then you go back to reality. But definitely recreation centers. But to round it out, I think they just have to be intentional and like really think, who is this for?
I think that's a great point to end on that, and I
Yeah.
really appreciate it. I think that's, yeah, I think that sums it all up. Because like, yeah, I think that's the biggest challenge. It's not just access. It's just what building those intentional spaces, building on uh, places that you can reclaim,
Hmm.
and also having that discussion about, who is it for, and do we even need to exclude, or can it just be for people?
Yeah.
Anyway, those are my major takeaways from this, and so I appreciate you for your time
Yeah.
and attention.
Yeah. Anytime. Thank you for having me again.